Hello, my name is Lyndon, and I wanted to welcome you to Free to Be. Here at Free to Be, we believe that telling our stories helps other people become free to be their true and authentic selves. And so here we are looking to collect stories from people that are true, that are authentic, that show their experiences in life, and allow those stories to help other people find freedom. And so I'll be sharing my story today, and you'll see themes of faith, of sexuality, and of queerness, and coming out to be who I am today. Thank you so much for listening. For as long as I can remember, I've always felt different around other boys. I can recall being young, like elementary school age, and playing soccer with all my friends and feeling weird when we would be changing around my teammates, but nobody else seemed bothered. And as I got older, this turned into all the boys talking about which girls at school they liked, who they thought was the cutest. And that's when I realized the thing that made me feel weird or felt different was that I was attracted to boys. And so what I would do is go along with it, right? I would try my best to not face that rejection by telling all the other guys that I liked girls. I even went as far as to have girlfriends and to be physically intimate with them, even if that wasn't actually what I wanted. This is what I felt like was required to be a teenage boy. Like, sure, some of these girls were awesome, some of them were so amazing, some of them were my close friends, but did I really desire to be with them in the ways that other guys wanted to? Was I really attracted to them? Or what was my reason for wanting to date them other than wanting to fit in with the rest of the guys? I feel like it would have been better if I would have just been best friends, but yet if you're friends with a girl for a long time and you're not dating, then like what's wrong with you? And so everything changed between my sophomore and junior year of high school when I became a Christian. And so, if many of you have been in the Christian spaces, you know that from many of their perspectives, being gay is a sin. Being gay is something that you're not allowed to be. Being gay is wrong. And the church that I went to definitely fell into that same narrative. And so I began to believe that same conservative Christian narrative that if I was gay, that was not God's plan for my life, and it was just a result of being born with a sinful nature. And so I got to figure out what I need to do in order to not be gay and to trust God. And so that was my solution. I was just going to trust God, and He would set me free from what it was we called same sex attraction. And so for many years, I continued to pray for God's freedom. I devoted myself to living in the way that I thought God would want me to live rather than living according to the flesh. And it was in this time that, of course, my Christian friends and my family like applauded me because I would be honest with people and tell them like, "Hey, this is how I feel," and it was like, "No, but continue to seek God. God's got your back. God will rescue you." And some people would even go to say like, "God is going to set you free from those desires. You're going to find an amazing wife. You're going to find an amazing girlfriend. You're going to have amazing kids in the future." And so it was constantly I was getting this praise and this accolades for continuing to suppress my sexuality and trusting God with it. And so I even would attend ministries focused on overcoming sexual brokenness of all forms. This included same sex attraction, this included pornography, and even at some points when things got really hard in my older years, I decided to attend Christian counseling in order to focus on the root of where these sexual desires were coming from. And through all that time, my desires never changed, but I still was like, I'm going to seek God and I'm going to figure out how to live this life. And so, fast forward to 2021, I started dating this amazing girl at my church young adult ministry. And I mean, from the textbook, we seemed perfect together. We were shipped as like that spiritual power couple. We try to keep God first and strive for purity and fun and honesty in our relationships. And she even knew my struggles with same sex attraction. And even after making mistakes as we were dating together that I'm really not proud of, she supported me every step of the way. And so we dated, and by the end of 2022, we were engaged and going through premarital classes and trying to figure out what it would look like to be married together. And by the middle of 2023, we were married. And so I wish I could say that was the end of the freedom story. A happy ending where God set me free from those desires of same sex attraction, that every prayer I prayed, God answered, and now I have an amazing wife and amazing children, and we lived happily ever after. But that is not the case. You see, if you ask Christians who say that they were same-sex attracted and now they are married, if you ask them, do you still have desires for the same sex? Most of their answers would be absolutely yes. They would say that their same-sex attraction has not gone away, but they've submitted it to God and have either decided to marry someone of the opposite sex or to stay celibate. And I would be that same way, no exception. If you were to ask me in my marriage, are you still attracted to guys? My answer would be yes. However, I'm submitting those attractions to God. I'm doing what I need to do in order to be faithful in my marriage, all of these kind of things. And so I was no exception to this narrative that we see. And I'll say that marriage was incredibly challenging. As we worked to develop intimacy, and specifically in the category of sexual intimacy, it really was a struggle for me. And so that was a time that we really decided to seek wise counsel. We joined small groups, plural. We attended marriage conferences, and we were really open and honest, and we talked about everything. And yet our struggles remained the same. We faced our own intimacy struggles early. We each of us had our own challenges that we were facing, but I knew that mine was found in my sexual orientation. And as much as I loved my wife and as much as I wanted her to feel loved and to feel desired, my same sex attraction was always present and it was not going away. But we were determined to make it work in our marriage. And so these months of challenges in our early marriage turned into over a year, and I began to feel this affecting my sense of self. I began to feel as though I was failing my wife. I began to feel as though I wasn't good enough. I began to feel as though I was doing something wrong. And despite the best effort from others' advice, despite spiritual guidance, despite praying and fasting and asking God to change, it felt like as time went on, our situation was only getting worse. Every sexual experience made me feel short, made me feel like I was falling short in our marriage, and I was falling deeper into shame, guilt, anxiety, and eventually depression. And at that moment, I was like, oh, I really need help. And so at that time, I sought to get back into personal counseling. And so, stepping into the office of my new Christian counselor, I had one goal. I'm going to overcome this same sex attraction and figure out how to love my wife in this marriage. And okay, maybe another small goal. I wanted to get over the anxiety. I wanted to get past the depression, and I wanted to get over the suicidal ideations that had came up in my life at that point. And so, as I was in counseling, we explored the intersections of faith and sexuality and mental health, and it converged into one session I remember where my therapist, she asked me, take away all the Christian language, same-sex attraction, all those kind of things, and give it like the regular, typical language. Would you say that you feel like you are straight, bisexual, or gay? And I couldn't even answer it in that session. I literally was like, let me go home, let me figure out my answer, and I'll come back to you. We can talk about that next session. And in that time, I prayed. I was trying to ask God what my sexuality was and all these kind of things. And I came back to the next session, and I remember for the first time ever being able to say the words, I'm gay. It wasn't even that I'm same sex attracted. It wasn't even that I was bisexual, but it was gay. And that was the first time I've been able to identify that sexual orientation within myself. And I knew that I had like this deeply internalized homophobia. But like, what was I to do now? And my answer at that time was nothing. I was just going to keep working on how to navigate my marriage, even though I was coming to terms with the fact that I was gay. I told my wife about this session. I told her about what I was contemplating. She's like, okay, we're going to figure this out together. And so we continued to read all the books and listen to the podcast and just thought maybe we can do this. Maybe we can, everything that's available, every resource that's possible, let's use that to support us. But all the while, I would see my wife cry. I would be crying. I had been in many conversations, praying and fasting and trying to see how this could work. And it was only making things worse. And so it was in this time in my life where I had talked to some wise counsel, talked to some friends, and really somebody had introduced the idea of like, have you ever thought about getting a divorce? And like that was something that was never on the table. I was like, that's not an option. You can't do that. And it was something that I had never even considered before. But when I really started to think about it, when I really started to pray about it, I was like, wow, if I'm going to make it through this, I have to step away from this marriage. Like, if I'm going to step away, if I'm going to make it, I have to become who I really know that I am. And I decided that I was going to step away from this marriage. And so I remember talking to my wife about it. Of course, there was a lot of tears, a lot of conversations, and making that hardest decision ever. And so we decided to move forward with divorce. And on 2 years to the day that we got married, 2 years later to that same day, we were officially divorced. And in this time of coming to terms with my sexual orientation, and getting divorced was really, I was facing so many different things because I was trying to figure out, God, what do you say about all this? I was receiving a wide range of responses from friends, family, my community. Some people were shocked. Some people were angry. Some people were supportive. Some people, or a majority of people, I would say, simply just didn't understand the journey that I was on. And the consensus across the board seemed to be God would never tell you to get divorced, and he certainly would never tell you that you're gay. And so everything that you're doing and everything that you're seeing is actually the flesh, and that's the devil, and you're going down this path to hell. And so I remember being confused by that because I followed the same principle I've always followed as a Christian: seek God, see what God's telling you to do, and do that. And it was in this time where I was like, that's exactly what I've been doing. I feel like God has called me to step away from this in order to literally remain alive, in order to literally not give in to those suicidal ideations and go into a deeper depression. But people didn't understand that. And so I was really confused. And it was in that time that I felt such a great loss, such great rejection. I had been a part of a church that I worked at for 5 years and had transitioned into being a therapist myself, but was still connected to this church. And at that time, I was told I could no longer lead there. I could no longer serve. I was removed from the prayer team. And I actually was supposed to be leading a mission trip to Mexico, and they pulled me from that as well. And so, all within the span of about 2 months, my whole life and interaction with this church that I had gone to for over 10 years at this point just changed. And so I think the interesting thing though is like when I was coming to terms with my sexuality and chose to get divorced, I never told anyone that being gay would mean that I would go date men. In fact, I specifically expressed to so many people in that time when I was contemplating what to do, like, I'm not getting divorced in order to go be with a guy. I'm literally getting divorced because if I don't, I won't be here on this earth for much longer. And so that was kind of like the narrative that I spoke. And so I was really confused of why people were automatically assuming that that was what I was going to do. And so I was like, I'm just going to seek God. And if he called me to be celibate, so what? I guess I'll do that. And so after about a month of my divorce, I began to get on this journey of healing, and really this journey of searching. And so I was reading, I was praying, I was studying, I was researching, like, God, what do you really say about being gay, and what is it that you want me to do? And in this studying and searching, I discovered an overlap where sexuality and Christianity became clear to me in a new way. Because from what I had read about and prayed and reasoned with people in my life, I no longer believed it was a sin to be gay. And I started to believe that God truly did shape me, and God made me, and God doesn't make mistakes. And so if God made me with these feelings and with these desires, and I prayed, I fasted, I've asked God to change me, and God never has, maybe it's because God doesn't want me to change. Maybe it's because God doesn't want gay people, queer people, trans people to change themselves in order to fit a certain mold, but God made them that way on purpose. And so I started to believe that and believe that God accepted me as who I am. And so what was I to do now? And so that takes me to the place that I am currently. So currently, I'm part of an amazing church community that's called The Collective, of a people who love God and they love me and they love people exactly as they are in their authentic selves. And being a part of The Collective has completely changed my life. I found amazing community there, community again that knows what I've been through, knows my struggle, knows exactly who I am, and supports me in being the queer person that God has made me to be. I found myself now in a relationship with a man who shows me daily exactly what it looks like to love myself, what it means to be in a relationship with someone where I can be my authentic self, and has shown me just really what it even looks like to understand attraction and romance in ways that I had never experienced because I was always forcing myself to, rather than it was something that I really experienced in my body. I would say my mental health has made a drastic shift from when I was in 2024 and early 2025 experiencing these suicidal ideations to now. Yes, I still face challenges along the way. I'm still facing challenges every day. There's rejection, there's things that come up every day. And yet I feel so much peace. I feel so much joy. I feel so much love. And I love living freely as my authentic self. And so I just wanted to say, if you're listening to this story, I would highly encourage you to do the work within yourself to figure out exactly who you are meant to be and what living authentically looks like for you. Because I believe that the abundant life we're looking for is found on the other side of freedom and liberation in freely being ourselves. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. More stories will be coming soon. If you are interested in telling your story, please message me or leave a comment on whatever platform you're on. And we are looking to collect more stories in order to help more people find freedom and liberation. I know it can be really difficult to condense a life story or section of our journey in a couple minutes. And so if anyone has any questions or wants to know more about my story, I would love to connect through messages as well. Thank you so much, and until next time, bye-bye.